Melody or S.W.A.L.K? What is it? What's
Melody.
right? And why is it that there are the two names?
Because it was always Melody. When I wrote it, it was Melody. And then there was these ridiculous brothers called the Bolting Brothers, who ran British Lion at the time, who distributed the film, the original distributors. I don't know if it was John or Roy. You could never tell the difference between the two of them. And I had a meeting with Putnam one day, and he said, "I've got this terrific idea. We're going to call it S.W.A.L.K." And Putnam said, "Are you going to distribute the film?" And he said, "Yes." He said, "You can call it whatever you want." So that's how it got that ridiculous name. Yeah. But it was always Melody when we made it.
It was always Melody.
Yeah. So really, Melody is correct as far as we're concerned. Okay, so what I start just touching on then is usually, and this is I know your first script, Alan. Usually you have a kind of a blank canvas and you just go off. But you had a number of kind of prerequisites that you had to meet. Can you just tell us about what they were?
What happened was the genesis of it was that I worked in advertising. I was a copywriter, and in the same agency was David Putnam and Charles Saatchi, and then they left. And then one day they took me to lunch at a place called Kebab and Hummus in Charlotte Street. And they said, "Alan," about halfway through the lunch, they said, "We've decided that we're going into the film industry, and today we're going to discover you." And I said, "Well, no one knows who you are. Why can't I discover you?" You know. But they said they're going to write a script. I wrote a script. Charles Saatchi wrote a script.
Oh, and Mark Lester.
Mark Lester. And Putnam went to New York. He tried to raise money, and Melody was the one that he raised the money, and it was quite difficult in those days for him to raise any money from anywhere. And he found this Seagram's billionaire called Edgar Bronfman. And he was the one who actually gave the money to make the movie. And Charles Saatchi's script he couldn't find the money for that. So Charles says, I remember him. Well, I had lunch with him afterwards. He said, "Oh, bugger this film business. I'm going to open an advertising agency." And I always think that it would have been so great if they'd have made Charles's script and not mine. I could have owned the biggest advertising agency in the world and owned the biggest art collection of modern art in the world. But unfortunately, Melody got made. That was the genesis of it. But Putnam came to me and he said, I've got 7 Bee Gees songs. Will you write a script about it? And it should be a love story with children. And that was the brief. And then I wrote this, which is based mostly on my childhood in Islington, and with a little bit of Putnam's own story.
That's one of the things that is most interesting in a way, is the fact that David Putnam always talks about being very middle class, and I know that you often sort of talk about your working class roots, and this is a true kind of matching of the two in this story, isn't it?
Well, I think that Mark's part and Sheila's part were a middle class family, and it was based on a grammar school in my particular grammar school and David Putnam's grammar school, which was in Southgate. It was a mixture of the two. Although the actual film that Waris created, the school was somewhere else, but it was based on grammar school, the old grammar schools, and where you did have a mixture of working class kids and middle class kids. And I suppose the S.W.A.L.K character was closer to my character, and I think Mark's character was closer to Putnam.
So Waris, at this stage in your career, obviously you already had a number of television productions under your belt, and you'd made a couple of films at this point. And obviously there's Alan's script, the Bee Gees songs that had to be in there, and I think Mark and Jack had already been signed up at this point as well. Is that right? Is that the point where you joined the story, so to speak? Yeah. So can you tell us about your decision to take this project? Because I know at that stage, obviously, you're a hot young thing, what it was that kind of won you over to making the film.
Well, when David came to me, my first reaction was I didn't know, in all fairness, how to deal with this. Obviously, I loved the script, but I was nervous. also I had to deal with a lot of kids. I was also dealing with these two very famous children who'd been in Oliver, and I thought maybe this is a gamble, and I don't quite know how to deal with it. And then I thought, if I don't do this, I'm going to regret it. So it was like one of those things where you decide, okay, and David was very supportive, and we discussed how it would be made and how to do it. I also was very fortunate to be able to get Peter Soshitsky, who is now a very prominent cinematographer. He works for David Cronenberg now, but Peter had done my very first ever film with me, and I learned a lot about how to shoot with him, and his vision and mine seemed to work. So the point is, it was an adventure, and it was a gamble. I've actually said tonight, when we get all meeting up again after all this time, I don't know whether I could do this again, because the kids are so brilliant, and they're kind of spontaneous, and there's a naturalism about them. I think I may have gone over the top now and become a bit artificial in the way I require things to happen. I don't know what you all felt, but to me, in my memory of it, there's something very spontaneous, and they married the images that were created had to be relevant to the music, because that's all what it's all about. And even now I think of some of the things that Alan had written the script for. Melody Fair, for instance. The very first shots of in the morning when you see London. To Love Somebody. All those things were shot with music in mind. And I would like to say that was probably way ahead of... Today they do that a lot. But in those days, to actually write a script around songs and tell a story, I think is quite remarkable. The only other thing I would say is, it's about innocence. Today, we were talking about this, 12-year-olds might even be getting married and having kids. In those days, they didn't do that. So we are dealing with an era of innocence, and maybe that's what appeals to it.
And we've put this film on in the context of a sort of London film season we're doing, and London plays an incredibly important role in this film. It is everywhere throughout the film, isn't it? And I wonder, and if you just tell us a little bit about sort of some of those sort of location decisions.
Well, I mean, I wasn't trying to do something that would simply show London it just took place in certain areas. For instance, it doesn't exist in Nine Elms, and all that area now in South London is being built up into high-rise glass houses, which, they're developing the American embassy there now. In those days, that what you saw was wasteland, and London, Soho, and those sort of places, those still exist. But, we just... I think that whole sequence in Trafalgar Square was a part of that, wasn't it, Alan? We just wanted to get an aspect of how it was, not knowing that now it is a part of historical image of London, which just doesn't... Trafalgar Square doesn't look like that anymore. There are no more pigeons there for a start. So, it's...
But the bulk of it originally was written for North London.
Oh, right.
And then they set it in South London. It's...
I think it was easier to find the location.
It was about finding the locations, yes.
Yeah.
And then there was the middle area, which is Soho, Trafalgar Square.
But actually, where we are here on the South Bank, actually we're in the perfect, because it's that sort of Battersea to sort of Bermondsey corridor almost, isn't it? Which is where the film was so heavily shot.
Where Melody lived doesn't exist anymore. Those sort of buildings, Peabody buildings, or whatever they're called, they were really old. They've all been knocked down now, but those were actually authentic. Her apartment, however, was built on a set. That's another interesting point, that all her... we shot this school sequence in this vast St. Paul's... Collett Court, wasn't it? Somewhere there. And we built some of the sets in the main body of the hall, and her apartment was built on in the hall of the school.
St. Paul's had moved out and to Barnes, so it left behind this old school in Hammersmith, which was beautiful, really. You had your own film set.
That's right. Yeah,
so it was empty, and so not only did it serve as the scenes of school, but they actually built other sets actually in the big open area in the middle.
And we had 400 kids during those scenes where they're all milling about.
And it's a remarkable cast, and really, actually, when you look back at it, the very best of British are there, and obviously we have Sheila and Mark here, but there were obviously other people, Roy Kinnear and so many other people in there. I wonder if sort of Sheila, from your point of view, I wonder if you can just tell us a little bit about sort of your memories of working on it, and in particular, I'm thinking about, for example, the scenes where there were obviously all those children sort of milling around, but also some of the scenes that you had to play with Mark and Jack in particular.
Yes.
I know it's a while ago now.
Well, it's a good while ago, and I'm going to tell you how many years ago it was. I don't remember. I remember, individual actors remember themselves and what goes on about, So I wasn't taking an awful lot of notice of anybody else except myself. So I'll only be able to tell you how I liked looking good. The kids were a bloody nuisance. Mark was great, up to a certain point. But, kids acting with children. Never act with children and animals, because they win. But I can remember a couple of silly things, like having terrible gastroenteritis and lying down between each take and being dragged up and smiling a lot and then throwing myself down. And I can remember saying earlier, the lasagna dinner scene, which Waris chose to shoot in long shot, in close up, from there. Everybody had, and we were eating this lasagna stuff for a whole day, and it really got very bad. And eventually there were buckets outside the set, and we were then going and spitting it out. And it was absolutely, and the smell. And it went on all, I can't tell you how ill we all were. And it just happened that the day after that, I had a day off from this, and I was going to do a day on Percy with Hal Bennett. I was playing a rabbi's wife who was at a penis transplant. That was the plot. And obviously, rabbi's wife, so you know what that was about. Circumcision, that's what. Anyway, we started the scene, and it was a tea. I had to serve him tea. And at one point, he had to eat a biscuit. And he said, "I'm awfully sorry, I can't eat a biscuit because I'm on a diet. I'm not put weight on, not for this film, I'm not." And so they constructed a sort of biscuity thing out of boiled eggs and thing. And there he was being spoken. We started the scene, and I saw him lift this, and I went totally blank. I thought, I cannot believe that I've just been stuffing lasagna down me for an entire 12 hours, and Hal Bennett is refusing to eat a nibble at a boiled egg. And I dried. And they said, "Stop. So, you're right? Yeah, I'm fine. We're just going to go again."
The glamorous world of filmmaking.
Nothing. And eventually I had to stop. They walked me around the studio saying, "All right, darling, you'll be all right. Just pull yourself together." And it was the worst day of my life. And it's your fault.
So,
apologies from now, from then.
So, Mark, you had obviously worked with Jack Wilde on Oliver, and you were kind of packaged together and sort of sold on almost for this production in advance. And I mean, there's quite an age difference between the two of you, although the two of you actually look very kind of similar age-wise on screen. I mean, what was there a kind of rapport between the two of you off screen?
Oh, there was definitely a rapport, and in fact, it was only tonight I realised that we were sold as a package. So I didn't know that. I thought it was just happened, and the film was there, and we were thrown together. But it was all revealed that it was a package that had been in the making for some time. So I've learnt stuff tonight that I never knew before.
Are you furious?
Oh, livid. I would have been livid if it wasn't such a success that it became. So, no, so the rapport, yes, there was a rapport there. Obviously, we worked together for a year. Jack was quite a bit older than me, but young in spirit, and he kind of took me under his wing, and he was a lot more kind of savvy and world streetwise than I was. So I kind of looked up to this guy as some like older brother type. But having known him for so long prior, obviously there was a chemistry there, and we also got on, which was very important.
One of the things, just before we came on, Waris was talking a little bit about when he was directing you in the scene in the headmaster's study, and was sort of pushing you slightly outside of your boundaries in terms of really having to kind of lose it. Well, I mean, Waris, can you just tell us a little bit about sort of directing Mark in that scene?
Well, the thing about it is we talked about how we related to each other this evening. I haven't seen Mark since he was that high. Look at him now. So the point is, when we were working together, the interesting thing was that he and Jack had already made Oliver, and because of that, they were the reason for the film being made, to be honest. Without them, we wouldn't have been able to make this film. What I had to do was push him whenever necessary, which was not that much. This particular scene was in the headmaster's study after having come back from their day in Weymouth. I wanted him desperately to get angry. And we went into multiple takes because he just couldn't summon up the anger, and I finally sort of had to drive. And so now you've got this thing going on, but very rare to do that, you know. I mean, we got on very well, didn't we, Mark? I hope. I think.
Yes. Yes.
It's a bit
Too late
difficult,
now?
I think,
Too
too
apart from
late
the
now.
anger
There's no memory.
It must be a bit like sitting down with one of your old teachers and receiving your kind of feedback in a way.
Yeah, I you know, the memories I have of it was just it was just a romp, really. It wasn't like work. It was a fun script. It was a fun thing to do, and really it was just a big holiday, really. I mean, it wasn't hard work. I'm sure the guys on the other side of the camera, it was hard work for all these, you know, kind of getting all these kids and getting them to do what they wanted to do. But, you know, we just were told, you know, told basically what to do, read the lines, memorised the lines, and just got on with it.
Were there any concerns when the film was being made? And obviously, it's a different time now, but some of the language is a little bit, you know, sort of non-PC, and there's, you know, like people sitting in fire. Some of the kids set fire to things, and then at the end, you know, there's that big kind of anarchic kind of sort of kids meltdown scene in a way. Was there any kind of concerns about the fact that there aren't kind of consequences to those actions, and the fact they do go as far as they do in those scenes, or was that sort of?
Never thought about it that way. I mean, now possibly PCs come into it, and we probably wouldn't be able to be allowed to do things like blowing up cars. But I mean, you know, bombs are dangerous, aren't they? But at that time, it was just the whole tracking situation of the kid trying to make this bomb that never went off, and then finally succeeding. And it was anarchic at the end, because the whole point is building up. It becomes surreal in a way, obviously, isn't it? I mean, these kids are building up to some kind of rebellion because the teachers are inadequate, and that was the whole point as well, saying that, you know, these kids are having to be taught by a lot of idiots. Well, not quite, but some.
A junior version of If.
Well, you could say that. It was influenced by, Zero de Conduit.
Yeah.
I mean, why not?
And the film had, you know, sort of, I think, modest success at the time, but that has kind of built over the years in the UK certainly. But in Japan and other countries, I mean, it was an absolutely huge hit, wasn't it? I mean, a massive hit.
Well, can I say that it was, but it's a shame because now it's got a cult thinking. Alan, you were going to tell us about how it actually melted into another movie, which was made by a very well-known director called Wes Anderson, who copied a lot of this because he admired the melody. And I was honoured.
This is Moonlight Kingdom, yeah.
Moonlight Kingdom, if anyone's familiar with it, is all about two kids running away. But he incorporated this idea because the other person who I was very thrilled about was Alfonso Cuarón, who's a well-known director, who actually called me and asked me if he could find out the rights because he wanted to remake it. My comment, however, was, how can you remake something that was based on innocence? How are you going to make that story today? I mean, I don't know whether you can or not. The kids will have to be older, or something will have to be done to change that. Anyway, that's my comment. But that was nice.
The nice thing is that Alphonse actually bothered to inquire about buying the rights, whereas Wes Anderson just ignored that and just remade it anyway.
Remade it, yes. But Alfonso, actually, I'm thrilled to have met him because I admire his work. And the fact he said something very complimentary to me. He said, "Waris, I was very young when I saw this film, and that's what prompted me to become a film director."
Gosh.
So that's not bad, is it?
Good.
Mm.